Peter? Well, good afternoon, everybody from sunny London. I'm absolutely honored to be with my friend Steve Judd, who's been doing amazing things. And I hope you tell us a little bit about what you've been up to, Steve, because there's so many good things coming up as well. But Steve and I want to talk about astrology and the movies. I wrote a book not too long ago about biopics, and I'm really excited to be talking to various astrologers about their favorite biopic films. So, Steve, would you like to tell us what you've been getting up to?
What have I been up to? Blimey. Well,
He's a busy
at the
man.
moment, I've got the attitude that you sleep when you're dead. I've just finished a wonderful 4-day conference in North Somerset with Penny Thornton of about 60 people, of whom half came from outside the UK, and people came from California and Vancouver and Korea
Wow.
just to spend 4 days with myself and Penny Thornton. That was amazing, and and of course, I'm doing the documentary on the history of Western astrology, and the first episode of that is going to be released free of charge to everyone in within 2 weeks. So that's happening. And then, of course, I've got a really big gig coming up in a couple of weeks where I'm featuring you, but we'll talk about that one later. So yeah, it's busy.
Exciting life, Steve. Steve and I have been friends for, I was thinking about it today, 27 years. We are old festival friends. We used to go to the Big Green and Rainbow Circle in Glastonbury together and do astrology workshops. But yeah, 27 years. Because
Is it really that long?
my daughter is going to
Wow.
be 27, and she was just a babe in arms, my first Rainbow Circle, and that's when we first met. So, yep, if you can believe that. We are that old.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Yeah.
Okay, so Steve has been talking a bit about his favorite biopic, which happens to be the wonderful A Beautiful Mind, starring Russell Crowe as John Nash. Now, this biopic didn't make it into the first version of my book, Mirror Mirror, but it will be in the second version. And the reason why it didn't make it in was not because it's not a great movie, it is. It's just that I had so many genius men in the book that I thought I had to even it out a little bit. And also, I'm going to be doing a series on the books that didn't, sorry, the films that didn't quite make it into the first book. I forgot quite a few films that I wanted in there. Angela Bassett playing Tina Turner. What's Love
Oh,
got to do with it? I found it in my files after the book was sent off to the printer. And this book, Mirror Mirror, contains, I watched 200 biopics, and we chose just over 100 of these biopics. And we have so much material left over that we are going for version two. So I'm busy with other things as well. But Steve, what do you love about this film?
A Beautiful Mind came out in 2001.
Correct.
It's the story of John Nash and his struggles with what today would be called his mental health, and the reconciling of his ongoing patterns of mental health challenges with his genius, absolute genius in mathematics and decoding. And I stumbled upon it by accident. And when I watched it for the very first time, it was one of those movies that just brought tears to my eyes straight away. And I actually think that's not just about the content, it's about the portrayal of Nash by Russell Crowe, because he played the role perfectly. And he did it. You could tell that when he played the role, he didn't just play the role, he immersed himself into the role. He became John Nash. And he portrayed him in such a way that like I say, it just brought tears to my eyes. So ever since that time, it's been right up there. And the only other movie even remotely similar like that is the one with Robin Williams and Robert De Niro,
Awakening.
Awakenings,
Yep.
which is a similar but different story. And I don't know what it is about movies like this that actually grasp me, but the struggle of disadvantaged humans to not only have a healthy, normal life, but to excel through challenge. To me, this is the 21st century way of representing heroism without being on a battlefield. So it's lovely. And
Another film in similar vein is also
signs.
Shine, about David Helfgott.
Oh, yes, yes.
Very similar when because he had severe mental health issues as well. He's a pianist. What I loved about A Beautiful Mind is, you know, um, John Nash, they called it schizophrenia. He struggled so badly with this. He had hallucinations, but he had to like teach his brain how to understand what these hallucinations were and if they were real or not. He had to really apply that beautiful mind to actually manage these hallucinations. And he had a wonderful marriage. Um, I believe they split up for a while, then got back together again.
Yes, I believe that to be the case. Yes.
But it's yeah. I mean, I watched it, rewatched it again just for the fun of it, because I was going to be speaking to you, so I got it was a real treat to see it again. But let's look at the astrology of these films now. In Mirror Mirror, because I'm managing so much data, I had to be consistent with the way I presented the charts. So I've always put the real life person being portrayed, which is John Nash, in the first chart. And we're lucky that both Russell Crowe and John Nash have time charts. And then Russell Crowe, the actor, would go in the middle. And then the transits of when the film was released would go on the very outside. And there were just so many things that really stood out to me about the connections between John Nash and Russell Crowe. They have similar Jupiters, only a few degrees apart, dissociate conjunction, but nonetheless only a few degrees apart. We are talking about a beautiful mind. So it's so important, I think, for John Nash to understand, for Russell Crowe to understand John Nash's mind in order to get a good portrayal of this genius out of him. And, do feel free to jump into something hits you too, Steve.
Mm.
But the other thing was, when the film was released, I often find that even though the person is deceased, the real life person is deceased, still those transits are active. And so transiting Pluto is right on John Nash's Saturn and Sagittarius. Again, we're talking about, a Jupiter world sign, a beautiful mind. And, I felt it kind of unleashed the power of this man's mind because John Nash, he was famous in academic circles, but the general public didn't really understand John Nash until the movie was released.
Yes. Yes.
There are so many other things in here that the transiting Saturn was in Gemini, another mutable sign, was conjunct John Nash's North Node. And what I found with looking at over 100 biopics is very often both Chiron and the nodes are implicated, because there's a sense of fatedness involved in, when this movie's released. And also with the actor who's portraying the real life person, they step into this role, they understand the person that they're portraying, and therefore they pull off a wonderful performance, which, Russell Crowe did pull off this brilliant performance of this very troubled man who had, the poor guy suffered in his lifetime
I,
with this mental
I
illness.
I find it fascinating that Russell Crowe's son is practically exactly square to John Nash's Pluto. So that
Mm,
tells me that Crowe would have really done some research into the character he was playing, and he would literally have tried to put himself in Nash's shoes
mm.
to understand what it was that made him act and behave the way he did. And I think it's a wonderful case of astrological serendipity more than synchronicity that the movie was released on when the sun was at 21 Sag, which is trining Nash's moon and Mars conjunction and opposite his sun. And I'm sure that wasn't planned. Hollywood doesn't do that.
We don't
But
think. Well, you never know. They might have, use a secret weapon of
It'd
astrology.
be pretty weird if they did. But to me, that's just a classic example of serendipity and synchronicity. So it was, you knew that this was going to be a blockbuster from the moment it was released, I think. Mind you, at that time, Russell Crowe was very, very big.
Yep, hot off the affair with um Meg Ryan as well. Remember they had a huge
Yes.
controversial relationship. So um this was after Gladiator as well. So he
Yes,
created a
indeed.
big name for himself. Hot actor. And you think about producers. They don't just Ron Howard produces, I believe. They're gonna he's another big name. He's not gonna pick you know some movie that's not going to work. He's gonna pick something that he believes in, which I think is quite fascinating as well. We got that Russell Crowe's Mars in Aries conjunct John Nash's Uranus in Aries, only a degree apart. I like nice tight orbs, so he's tapping in,
Yeah, I
you
like tight orbs
to
too, Alex. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
he's tapping into that genius of John Nash, and he's using the physicality because this movie did have a lot of physicality in it, to understand the character, the person he was portraying.
Um, Remember, Russell Crowe is with his, as you say, the Sun and Mars in Aries and Jupiter in Aries. I remember he broke both his legs when he was filming Robin Hood,
Yeah,
and that delayed the filming by 6 months. Russell Crowe is he's never been what you call a sophisticated or erudite character. He's always been a bit gung ho. He's always played action movies or been the dynamic person. He carries himself with a kind of forcefulness and directness as opposed to subtlety and tact and charm.
yeah. The impulsiveness, I think,
Yeah.
he's really good at understanding. Again, that Mars and Aries, um, bringing that out in John Nash's character as well, because there was a scene in the movie where he was having a hallucination and he had his baby in the bath with the bath running, and um, he called his wife, and the wife realized that he's hallucinating again, so she had to run home and get the baby, and then there was a scuffle, and he accidentally pushed her or hit her, which led to their eventual breakdown of their marriage because she took the baby and ran off. I think that kind of physicality is something good that Russell is good at portraying as well. And of course, we think about Gladiator, what what kind of film that was.
I think, well, he's a really strong Aries. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not making sure, I'm not stating that all Aries are like that, but it does lend itself to impulsive and volatile behavior.
Mm.
Um, and over the course of his life, he's had a number of brushes with the law where his shortness of temper or his capacity for sudden action has got him into trouble. So I think that in many ways, playing John Nash would have, on the one hand, Russell Crowe's a great character to play a gladiator, Spartacus. But to play an academic with schizophrenia would have really challenged him to slow down his natural impulsiveness and to do some research into the character and get into the psychology. And I think that when I saw Crowe actually so struggling, so pushing himself through really difficult stuff to when playing Nash to make sure that he was able to stay on board and hold himself together for what needed to be done at the time, because Nash was the only person in the world who could do what he did. He could see the patterns in number. I think Crowe played it. I think it's Crowe's magnum opus.
Yep, I agree. I
I don't
totally
know if
agree.
he would agree with that. Um,
I think there's still life left in him. I think he's still got a career he can build on still. He's only what, 60? So there's still a little bit of life left in him.
yeah, yeah.
But maybe the action action film days are past him.
You can see it with his Jupiter in Aries. You can see him now taking on the role of God or something like that in his next movie, I suspect, or Zeus.
Yes,
You know,
absolutely. I've done a lot of work with astrology and education, and when you're teaching children, you teach them by Jupiter signs, or at least I do, because Jupiter changes signs once a year. So you'll either have,
yeah.
Jupiter in Aries or Jupiter in Taurus learners. But the Jupiter in Aries really loves to learn by competing. They love to do the speed rounds. And that's how I teach them. I can't let them have their own way all the time, but that's the area that they thrive. And usually they'll develop one skill that they become unbeatable at. So, that kind of learning, I think, ties in well with John's Jupiter in Taurus, because the Jupiter in Taurus learners like to take their time. They'd like to, have a bit more time to consume, digest, and eliminate, as well. But fascinating take on this very famous mathematician.
I would, and finally, perhaps on this, I would also note, I've just noticed that Crow was born with a very strong trine in air signs from the moon in early Aquarius to Venus in early Gemini. And I noticed that both Pluto and Uranus are going to be hitting these 2 points in a very favorable way over the coming year, year and a half. So it really wouldn't surprise me to see a really big resurgence of Russell Crowe in the next couple of years in a way that is kind of his high point. We shall
Yeah,
see. We shall
yeah,
see.
excellent.
Hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next film. Now, this is my choice. Now I let you choose your favorite film, but I wanted to find a similar theme. And we talked a little bit about Shine. I wish we had time to do three, but the next film I loved, one of my favorites, is The Imitation Game. It's very similar theme. We have a code breaker. He is not schizophrenic, but he's very much on the autistic spectrum. And he never quite fit in. He was socially awkward. Probably had well, he definitely was on the autistic spectrum, and but yet he was doing all this genius work, and he did break the Enigma code. But he realized that if he started intercepting all the airplanes and all the ships that were coming to attack England, that they would give the game away, that they had cracked Enigma. And because of his understanding, okay, we can't save everybody, but we can bring the war to a quicker end. He actually saved millions of lives.
Yes.
And running alongside of this, another reason why I love this film, because he was homosexual as well. And he was persecuted. He was chemically castrated to stop him having affairs with men. And I just think when you look back at that era, and you just think, whose business is it? What people get up to behind closed doors. And how glad I am that we're now talking about it, and but he had a very difficult time, expressing himself sexually because it wasn't accepted back then. Okay, so let's have a look at the astrology for this. So Benedict Cumberbatch played Alan Turing. So again, just to remind you what I'm doing. So we have the middle bit, which is Alan Turing, Benedict Cumberbatch, who portrayed him, and then the transits for when the film was released. So Benedict's chart, we have to be careful because it's not timed. So we can't use the angles on this. But I just want to point out, Alan Turing had Uranus in Aquarius right on his MC.
Mm.
So this is a man who didn't fit in anywhere in society. He played by his own rules. He had to endure a lot of persecution just because of the way he did things. He didn't fit in with everybody else. And I also think it's interesting, we have another brilliant mind. The sun was transiting his Jupiter when the film was released.
Yeah.
And
Notice
with,
that.
within a few degrees of Benedict Cumberbatch's, very compassionate take with Neptune in the middle of that conjunction. Other things that I thought were really interesting is we got a Jupiter in Taurus, conjunct Saturn in Taurus conjunction as well. Now, these planets, they're kind of like opposites. Saturn hones and brings it all together. Jupiter expands, and we got it in Taurus. I noticed conjunct Algol, but we won't talk about Algol today. They have this teasing out of Alan Turing's way of thinking. Things maybe again, like as in A Beautiful Mind, the general public might not have realized things about Alan Turing, other than like sort of the myth and the man, that he allegedly ate an arsenic-laced apple to kill himself. We might know little things like this, but we get to see another reason why I like biopics, although they're not always so historically accurate. It helps us humans to imagine their life and their achievements.
It's in my experience of doing readings, it's Uranus conjunct the midheaven, especially in Aquarius,
Yeah.
is basically the trademark of mad genius,
Mm.
or a very good bank robber, but normally mad genius, and very unpredictable, but genius because and basically also I know that most astrologers will say that Saturn is the ruler of time. But with Uranus on the midheaven, I don't think that Turing always lived in exactly the same time zone as everyone else.
No, I don't
I
think so
think
either.
his ability to sort of throw himself forward in time to see the results of the actions. And I think that's what caused him to make the decisions he made about using his knowledge sparingly. And as you say, saving millions of lives by doing so. It's tragic that only now do we recognize the quality of this man and the persecution that was pushed upon him by old men who should have known better, who were probably struggling to deal with their own sexual orientation and saw him as an outright threat
Yep.
to themselves. But this is British history for you. So,
And
uh,
I forgot to ask you with A Beautiful Mind, but we can go back if you like. But the other thing that fascinates me is, and I've encouraged the readers of the book to look at their own charts, because Alan Turing is one of my favorite men in history. We have the same ascendant,
as as
Alan
John
Turing.
Nash.
No, no, as me, I have the same ascendant as Alan Turing.
Oh, right.
So I'm saying that, the people that we admire, we would have strong connections to them too. And his Jupiter is on my descendant. So there's a strong reason why we're attracted to people, even if we don't know them personally. There's strong astrological reasons. Also, um, his Pluto Venus conjunction is on my natal Venus. So yet another reason why, I think that I'm very strongly admiring Alan Turing, and this movie in particular, why it was in my favorite section.
I might suggest then that though, but with that Venus-Pluto conjunction in Gemini, um, his own attitude towards his own sexual psycho patterning would have been diverse and multifaceted. I think he would have been as screwed up by it as other people would have been on the receiving end. I don't really think that he was much more. I think he was much more comfortable in the land of numbers than in the land of feeling and emotion.
I would totally agree with that. And he would be, attracted to women who maybe have that sort of power, but yet, you know, he doesn't want the physicality. Because
Yes.
he'd offered to marry the Keira Knightley character. Her name slips my mind at the moment, but then he admitted on their engagement party that he was homosexual. And they didn't get married. But it's all very interesting things, to do with synastry. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I just found again and again and again these biopics. They spoke the language of astrology without using the significators. They were just all there. Well,
And Benedict Cumberbatch also. I mean, he is a figure of how can I describe it? He's someone who is a person of fascination to many different genders. He seems to have a kind of superficial, asexual way of managing his life in the diversity of his roles, from Alan Turing to Sherlock to Doctor Strange. And I mean, he's got the sun sextile Jupiter pretty strongly. But if the time of birth is even remotely correct at midday, if it's less than 8 hours out either way, he's still got a strong sun square moon. So I do see him as actually quite a complicated character inside himself as well. But so I think he would have jumped at this role.
yeah,
I
another
think I
example of
think
someone who immersed himself.
yes, indeed, exactly. Same as Crow with Nash. And really, if you're going to play a role, well, it's similar to what you and I do. You know as well as I do, when we're in the flow, when it's happening, when you're doing a reading for someone, or when you're talking about something and you're not quite sure what you're going to say, and you suddenly open your mouth, and then what Penny Thornton calls the X factor, it just kicks in. And
Yeah,
then you come out with something and everyone's jaws just drop. How did you do that? How did you know that? And I think that these two guys were able to do that with the roles they were playing as well. It's another example of what I say is the X factor.
yeah, absolutely.
Mm,
Okay,
fascinating.
so we'll go on to your event.
Yes.
There we are. I'm so
Yes.
excited for it.
Now, yes, I love the headline shifts happen because therapy doesn't do retrograde.
Yeah, a lot of
Uh,
people commented to me about that too. They love it too.
yes, that was just a 1 second brainstorm between myself and my producer on my documentary. He said it, I tweaked it, and we just looked at it and went, don't need to touch that anymore. It's brilliant. Um, and the idea, I mean, you're going to be doing stuff on education and algo, and you're going to be potentially doing an astrological tour of London for the early arrivals. I'm going to be doing stuff on humor and astrocartography. Penny's going to be doing a lot of stuff on Saturn, Neptune, and the Saturn Neptune conjunction and the Jupiter Neptune cycles in the charts of bombastic leaders. Rick is going to be doing a lot of stuff on oppositions, as well as he's going to be doing at least one workshop a day. But to have Nick Campion doing a lecture on the ascent of the soul into the heavens, into the stars, to get Nick Campion to speak at a non-academic conference is I've never thought of it. I can't remember a time when he's ever done it before. He's doing it as a favor. I begged him, basically. I begged him and Rick put pressure on him. So he's doing it. But to me, having Nick is he would not like it if I were to call him an astrologer, because he is, by his admission, he is not. He is a historian of astrology, but he is the most knowledgeable and erudite historian of astrology in the world
Yep. I couldn't
at
agree
this
with you more.
time. And to have him doing a lecture on the prime slot Saturday afternoon is such a privilege. So yes, we're doing this, and it's going to be at a 4-star hotel with gym, lots of grounds. It's going to be totally vegetarian because I've just finished this long gig I did at Amadown in North Somerset for 4 days with Penny Thornton, and we insisted that all the food was vegetarian, and it was amazing. Everybody loved it. So all the food will be vegetarian. It'll be I'll be publicising this from March the 1st onwards. There's going to be a range of fees, early birds, various reductions, but the top price will be about 8 to 900 pound, unless of course you want to arrive early. There will be some people who want to arrive a day early, especially if they're coming from abroad, and they'll have the option of going on your tour, your astrological tour of London, which I find a fascinating concept. Where are you talking of going again?
So we're going to walk by the Bracken House, which is London's astronomical clock. We're
Yes.
going to walk down. We're going to visit the Smithsonian Museum. It's about a 10-minute walk. We're going to visit William Lilly's plaque, the astrology shop, um, London Stone,
Yes.
Watkins. I believe there's a Harry Potter alley in that area as well.
Yeah.
So there's lots of good things to see. And also when we're in Fleet Street in the money district, we're going to see lots of tributes to Mercury because Mercury. So
Yes,
I'm going to see
indeed.
lots of statues, looking up, being careful where we're walking, but looking up and seeing how many Mercuries we can count.
Also, right at the point where Fleet Street becomes the Strand, um, right outside the main doorway of the Royal Court of Justice, there is the plaque on the wall to the Devil Tavern, which used to exist exactly opposite the Royal Courts of Justice. And in between it, in the middle of the road where the Strand becomes Fleet Street, is this huge statue comprising lots of astrological and demonic symbology. It's a really weird thing to have right outside the Royal Court of Justice. It's a bit spooky, to be honest, but it's fascinating.
I'm just trying to think what else is around where Charles Dickens used to live. I know it's not quite astrological, but it's in that area. Um, there's just so many things, good things to see in London, and I'm really glad that we're having an event in London itself, and not too far outside of London, so we can you know show our American friends how groovy London is.
Yeah, it's only 20. The venue is about 2 miles from a mainline station, a short taxi ride, and that mainline station is only 20 minutes from Euston or St Pancras. So it's very easily accessible, both for residential and non-residential. Hopefully, we will set out with the or total residential, and then I don't know if there'll be non-residential tickets, but that will come second. Residential comes first. So yeah, it's the biggest thing I've ever organised in my life.
How
Eek.
exciting. And just to put this in there too, the following weekend, Rick and I will be in Portugal
Along
at
with,
this
yeah, you and
conference.
Rick.
Yes,
Yeah, 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 because it's the Portuguese Astrological Association.
yes, that's
Yeah,
right. It'll be my fourth time with them, so I feel very close to the Portuguese
nice.
Astrological Society. And one more thing, um, I forgot to add, we also know each other, you and I, from the MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, where Nick Campion was our main tutor. And
Indeed, I was the first person to sign up for the second intake, and I was the 11th person in the world to graduate with that degree because I did an accelerated MA. And now, of course, there's hundreds and a
yeah,
fair few PhDs, except that they can't call them doctors of astrology. So I think they're doctors of applied cosmology or something like that, you know. But um, it's the best thing that's ever happened to us to serious academic astrology for 400 years since um, Bruno was burnt at the stake.
yeah.
So yeah,
Well, I mean, like you say, hundreds of people have now have the MA, and it really has improved the academic um,
indeed.
studies of astrology. By the way, I have a doctorate in astrology, but it's from India,
Okay. All right.
where they're a bit
Okay.
more accepting of
Well,
astrology
yes,
as
they
a
are.
culture.
I just want to share completely different. I'm going to be showing at this conference, I'm going to be showing at least the first two, if not the first three episodes of my documentary on the history of Western astrology. And I've just got this little nudge that I want to share something with you. Literally two months ago, I was stood in a basilica in the center of Florence, not the cathedral, but a big basilica. And I was stood in between, separated by 20 yards, the tombs of Michelangelo and Galileo. And right next to the tomb of Michelangelo was the tomb of Machiavelli. So right next to each other. Galileo, the founder of modern science, astroscience, Michelangelo, one of the greatest artists of all time, and Machiavelli, the diplomat come spy, and these three all being entombed within 20 yards of each other. You can imagine what type of party they're having somewhere upstairs.
Well, Steve, thank you so much for being my first guest. I hope to do a lot more of these. I got some interesting people lined up, but I really appreciate you taking the time after you've had such a busy weekend. And we'll get some advertising done for Shifts Happened, and we'll get some work done. And it's going to be a very, very great event, and I can't wait.
Oh, it's going to be great. Really look forward to working with you again, Alex.
Thank you. Okay. Take care.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Recording stopped. Great.
Okay. And we